Okay, so this is the second of our case studies that for climate change. We just looked at the Arctic and the impact of climate change on wildlife and habitats. The other thing the specification asks you to look at is the consequence of climate change on tourism and tourist destinations. That's people going on holiday. And so we are going to, for our second case study in this area, look at the Bahamas, which you can see the location here. We're looking at the West Indies, just off the coast of Florida, to the north, east of Cuba. You have the Bahamas, an island called the Bahamas. So this video will focus on the impact that climate change has on what is a very popular holiday or tourist destination. Okay, so tourism, as you can imagine, with a lovely stunning island which has high temperatures for large amounts of the year, is a very important source of income for the Bahamas. It pays for their health services and their hospital care and their nurses and their doctors. It helps to pay for schools and roads, and millions of people across the world are employed by tourism, and in Bahamas there'll be no exception here. They also have large numbers of people that will be employed by tourism. So tourism is very, very important to the Bahamas. So if we look at the specifics, in 2015 it generated 40% of the island's gross domestic product, and earned it $1.3 billion worth of money, and that's the sorts of money that you would be using to improve your healthcare and your facilities and your schools. So you can see that income from tourism is really, really important for the Bahamas. Half of the government spending on health, education, sanitation, roads and airports comes from tourism. So it is heavily reliant on tourism. Tourism is something that the Bahamas cannot afford to lose. Unfortunately, climate change does threaten to change the tourist industry on the Bahamas irreparably and for a long period of time. So what is the impact of climate change on tourism? We've already established that tourism is really important to the Bahamas. The Bahamas is classed as a SID. Okay, so if you hear the word SID in an exam, basically it is short. SID is short for a small island developing state. So there are a number of SIDs, or small island developing states, that are impacted by climate change, because of course if you're an island, then you are going to be impacted by sea level rise, and Bahamas is one of those. It is classed as a SID, a small island that is developing. The Bahamas, of course, has a lot of beaches, but as the sea level rises each year, those beaches are a severe risk of erosion. So the beaches that many people travel and spend a lot of money to come and see and to experience are disappearing because of sea level rise. They have also experienced damage to their underground fresh water. As the sea level rises, it starts to flood the land, and it contaminates the fresh water with salt water. And obviously this is an impact because it reduces the amount of fresh water available for tourism. They have also experienced stress on their coastal ecosystems. Many people spend a lot of money to come to the Bahamas to snorkel in coral reefs. Coral does not like sea level rise because it becomes too dark for the sun to penetrate, so there is no photosynthesis. It also changes the temperature of the sea, and coral does not cope well with any change in temperature of water and dies often as a result. So if the coral is dying off because the depth of the sea is greater, or the sea temperature has changed, then people are just not going to want to come to the Bahamas as regularly. So the coral being at risk also impacts how many people might visit and want to visit the Bahamas. There has also been damage to the infrastructure in the Bahamas. By infrastructure, I mean their road network and their hospitals and their electricity supply lines, because of increased frequency and intensity of tropical storms. And I've talked about this on previous videos. The Bahamas is one of the small island developing nations that is at risk of hurricanes, and there is increasing intensity and number of hurricanes because of the increase in sea temperature. If you have a sea temperature of 27 degrees, that is what will cause your hurricanes to form. And because the sea temperatures are rising, there is an increasing number of hurricanes, and they are increasing in intensity, and this is having a big impact on the infrastructure of the Bahamas. So you can see that tourism is going to be deeply impacted by climate change because of the erosion it will cause, and because of the damage to the coral and the damage to the infrastructure from increased storms. So this is why we have chosen this as a case study. There's a number of specific impacts that climate change will have on the Bahamas.